Good morning. Today we are going to discuss an article from the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research. The title says Osteogenesis Imperfecta: Skeletal Outcomes After Bisphosphonate Discontinuation at Final Height. So, what is osteogenesis imperfecta? It is an inherited genetic disorder that is present at birth, and it is also known as a brittle bone disease. A child born with the osteogenesis imperfecta may have soft bones that break, that is, it fractures easily. So when we see the picture of a normal healthy bone and a brittle bone, we see that the compactness of the bone or the spongy bone is the difference between the compactness. So this is the healthy bone and this is the bone which has osteogenesis imperfecta. What happens in osteogenesis imperfecta? The normal cell usually produces a collagen which is deposited in extracellular matrix and modified for strengthening by deposition of minerals. Whereas in osteogenesis imperfecta, the mutated cell, here the defective gene is COL1A1, which forms defective collagen which is associated with some symptoms like blue sclera, low ocular rigidity, low corneal diameters. So this is the basic difference between a normal cell which deposits the normal collagen and there is a gene which is defective which deposits the defective collagen. So what is gene related? How is the gene related to a protein? A gene gets translated to a protein. This is a normal gene translating to a protein. Whereas when there is a mutated gene, there is a mutation, a defect which forms an altered protein or it doesn't form a protein. This is the basis of a mutation which forms an altered or an absence of protein. So how do we classify osteogenesis imperfecta? So we have 4 types, almost 5 types here. Here we can find the first type which there is non-deforming OI with blue sclera. They have a blue sclera. The picture itself clearly explains blue sclera, multiple fractures. Here the second type, the child, infant doesn't grow or there is less survival rate. The third one, it progressively deforms. The fourth one, there is multiple fractures but there is no blue sclera. The fifth is abnormal ossification happens. So these are the types of osteogenesis imperfecta, and they classify osteogenesis imperfecta by how it is. It is autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or is a X-linked recessive, and what type of genes are involved. So accordingly, they have classified the osteogenesis imperfecta. And how does the osteogenesis imperfecta phenotype look like? So we have the skeletal fragile fragility we can see, that is skeletal deformities, muscle weakness, looseness of ligaments, difficulty in breathing, and in the oral cavity we have dentulogenesis imperfecta, blue sclera, hearing loss and metabolic abnormalities along with the cardiovascular abnormalities. These are the phenotypic features of osteogenesis imperfecta. And how do they treat osteogenesis imperfecta? By giving inhibitors or stimulators. Inhibitors are monoclonal antibodies like romosozumab and like bisphosphonates. We are going to talk about bisphosphonates in this article, and there are 2 types, it is zoledronate and palmidronate, which they have used in this study. What does these do? They either inhibit the osteoclasts, stimulate osteoblasts or osteocytes. So this is the mechanism of action of bisphosphonates. So this journal was published in the year 2020 and the journal impact factor is 5.1. How does it show the novelty? Because earlier studies they have done only the effect of bisphosphonates, but they haven't studied the effect of withdrawing or stopping the bisphosphonate treatment after the child attains the final height. So this study aimed to evaluate the individuals with osteogenesis imperfecta who had received intravenous bisphosphonates during skeletal growth and who had discontinued the treatment after achieving the final height. So materials and methods, patient selection, they included 31 patients, which were 22 females, which were diagnosed with OA who had started intravenous bisphosphonates. They had used both types, either palmidronate or zoledronic acid, before the age of 13, and all patients were treated for a minimum of 2 years and discontinued the treatment after reaching the final height, with ages ranging 13.4 to 20 years at the time of discontinuation. The treatment administration was administered intravenously, and zoledronic acid was increasingly used than the palmidronate. What they did the bone density measurements using the DEXA, which is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. This method used to evaluate they evaluated the lumbar spinal area from L1 to L4. So from L1 to L4, they did the DEXA scan and found the density of the bone here. And they also used the peripheral quantitative computed tomography, which shows the results like this. So when we take a peripheral quantitative measurements, we can see the trabecular as well as the cortical volumetric area. So here we can see the cortical bone which is thicker here and the trabecular the inner one, and we can measure how the density is. Then they did a statistical analysis on all the parameters they measured using the chi-square tests, PAT test or Wilcoxon test depending upon the normality, independent t-test or Martin-Knew test. It's also depending upon the normality and whether they are comparing continuous variables between individuals. An analysis of variance was employed to evaluate the differences between the groups. So the results showed that bone mineral density changes at 4 years after treatment discontinuation in the lumbar spine area bone. It was increased by 4%. So this indicates a positive change in bone density following cessation of bisphosphonates. And the volumetric bone mineral density analysis using the peripheral quantitative computed tomography showed a decrease in trabecular volumetric BMD at the distal metaphysis of 19%, while cortical volumetric BMD increased by 4%. It suggests a differential effects on bone density depending on the type of bone being measured. And the fracture incidence of these patients who experienced decreased significantly from 42% in 2 years before the treatment discontinuation to 16% in the last 2 years of follow-up. So this reduction in fracture rates highlights the potential benefit of discontinuing bisphosphonates. And there were no new vertebral compression fractures, and the longitudinal follow-up study included assessment at 2 and 4 years after discontinuation, allowing comprehensive evaluation of skeletal changes. So they did a hand wrist X-ray for a 15-year-old female in this picture, and they measured how the lines are, and we can see some lines here which are the bisphosphonate induced metaphyseal transverse lines which reduced after the discontinuation of the treatment. Here it is prominent and in this picture it is reduced. So the limitations of this study was the sample size, it was only 31, and the retrospective design, lack of control group, variable treatment regimens, limited long-term data and no assessment of functional outcomes. The future scope was longitudinal and prospective studies, larger multi-center cohorts can be used, and there needs to be some comparison groups, functional and quality of life metrics, biomarker and genetic correlation has to be studied, and optimal timing and dosing strategies have also been mentioned. So it concluded, this study concluded that there is no decline in bone mass and stopping bisphosphonate therapy after the completion of growth, and which does not lead to the decrease in bone mass at critical sites such as the lumbar spine or the radius shaft. So this finding suggests that discontinuation may not have adverse effect on bone density in skeletally mature individuals with osteogenesis imperfecta. And this study is an observational study, but did not state that they had followed the slope components. But when we analyze the slope guidelines, they provide clear information on objectives, methods, results, and conclusions. Areas with partial compliance include the discussions on potential biases, rationale for study size, subgroup analysis, and generalizability of the findings.